Welcome to episode 24 of the new Barbarians Podcast. Today is Tuesday, June 17th, 2025. We are live, so the podcast will be available on YouTube immediately and the usual platforms later today. In our last podcast, Herb Blank discussed the history of quant finance and his views on AI in finance and a plethora of awesome anecdotes about how much has changed, but much has stayed constant throughout the last 4 decades in finance. Our guest today is one of the sharpest minds building at the intersection of AI, quant research, and financial data. Ihsan Saracgil is the Chief Product Officer at OpenBB, a platform that's helping tear down the old walls of legacy market data systems and making advanced analytics available to every investor. He's part quant, part operator, and fully immersed in how AI is changing the way markets are understood and traded. We're excited to have him here to share OpenBB's journey and to show us how new tools can give us an edge in analyzing something as complex as the Fed's own communications. Welcome, Ihsan.
Well, nice meeting you. Glad to be here.
So a quick update on factor performance last week. Good inflation news, as well as sensitivity to oil price performed well. I think we saw that continue through the weekend with turmoil in the Middle East and through today. So I guess there aren't really any big surprises in the factor space. In fact, it doesn't look like anything is statistically significant above, 2 standard deviations. So yeah, everything looks pretty normal and I think what you would expect. And with that, I will kick it off to Mark.
Thanks, Bill. I want to make sure you guys can hear me here.
We can.
Excellent. I'm testing out my new lavalier. I'm heading to Prague for the Bitcoin conference at 6 o'clock tonight. So Ihsan, I will make sure that folks are aware, or I'm sure that I will already have some folks there who are using your system. So I got a new lavalier mic, Bill. I like to dabble with some of these new technologies. So thanks, folks, for being a beta test here. Yeah, so I'm going to share it right now. What you said, Bill, is it's rather shocking that oil's move, from down 18 to up on the year, hasn't moved those factors more. And, we're seeing it, and I'll show you a slide where, April is a distant memory. So let's go with, I'm going to switch over to my, hold on here, my handy dandy slide. So, and again, this is why we want.
Seems like we lost Mark. Same thing happened last week. I'm not sure if this is his new mic or he's in a new location, but we can, move on regardless. I think he was going to walk us through the scorecard. I'll assume that, Bitcoin is continuing to behave a little bit differently. And, he said that April was a distant memory. And I think in terms of global asset behavior, we are in a different regime now. And with geopolitical uncertainty at its peak, it's actually a really good time to talk about FOMC minutes. So Ihsan, can you maybe just start off by talking a little bit about OpenBB, generally the company that you guys started, how long you've been there, and I guess your own bio, basically.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And also the mark is back, so we can switch after this if you would like. Yeah, so this is Ihsan. I'm the latest joinee to OpenBB. So I've been with the firm. It's crazy to think, but it actually hasn't even been a year. It feels like a lifetime already. I mean, the speed of things that we do here, I feel like I've accomplished more than I've accomplished in my previous jobs for years almost. So I have basically my role here is that I was more like a research guy at the very beginning, but I moved on to a slightly different, like maybe product plus research type of role. So our team is fairly small. We're roughly about like 15 people. It's actually the project has started, I guess, like almost 4 years ago. So it was a very successful open source project. It's still like one of the most popular projects in finance and open source. So it started around like 2021. I actually remember in my previous job that it first came out. I think it was called GameStonk Terminal. So if you guys remember the 2021, I guess like around that time, Citadel, GameStonk, all of those stories. I thought it was very impressive, but it was more like a developer tool at the time. Like I remember using it. It didn't have the nice UI and things of that nature, but it was essentially the idea was that for people to be able to bring all these separate data sets that they need to work with, um, you basically need a layer in which you just put everything together. So it wasn't really around AI because this is pre-LLM world. The idea was essentially that let's try to come up with a workspace type of concept where I should be able to throw in any kind of data set. Then every piece of data that I throw in here is essentially like I'm building these dashboards, and inside my dashboard I have these widgets. Every data set is essentially a widget, so I can have like very standardized way to control this data. It's like very unified. It doesn't feel like I'm basically switching between like 10, 20 different applications, things of that nature. It's just one screen to look at. That was the origin, the genesis of it in a way. So it developed the open source side of it, which is more like, let's try to integrate these different types of data sets into a unified like Python language and then things of that nature. But over the last maybe year or so that almost I've been here, so we took on a more commercial route. So our commercial version of this is very much centered around the modern workspace. And obviously ever since ChatGPT and whatnot came about, we've actually added a very important component that is like a huge complement to that first piece that I talked about, which is like let's unify all the data in a single place on the front end. And that second component is essentially let's have all that data that you just unified, which is a big accomplishment. Let's expose that unified data to AI services, right? So, and this mix of these two ideas essentially is the core of the commercial version of OpenBB that we sell at institutional level, enterprise level. Because the idea is that, look, if you look at all the established vendors, like, Mark started talking about these things before we lost them. For the established, I guess the norm is that you have these applications and the client comes to you. But in the world that we're living now, like, in the hedge fund space, sell side, whatever area that you look at, like the data, the code that you write, now in the prompts that you send, all of this is your core IP, right? So if you're effectively giving this away, and there's a lot of data snooping going on under the hood. It's almost like it's taken for granted at this point.
I love
So
that term. Ihsan, we're going to have to hashtag data snooping.
data, so no, it is an official term. It's actually a term is statistics, data snooping. It actually means something other than what I'm saying here, but the term is about right. So our approach is essentially that, look, if the data is your IP, AI is like all the custom agents and different ways that you can integrate AI to data is the core part of a financial firm's IP. You want to own it, you want to control how it's deployed, you want to have access to your own logs, and you don't want to leak that data all over the place. So the way that we've been approaching is that let's take this workspace concept and we deploy to you privately. So it lives on-prem, it could live in your physical servers, it's your private cloud, wherever that you want to do. And you can customize this whole thing based on the way that you would like to work. So, Mark, you started talking about, for instance, crypto. macro, treasuries, equity. So we don't sell the data, but essentially this interface is providing that scaffolding, that infrastructure to put it with whatever data set that you want to put in there. And you own it, you control it, you design it. Everything is private to you, and everything is custom tailored to you. Like that's where we differ from a lot of the established vendors.
And it's such a good selling point at hedge funds. I don't know if it was 10 years ago, but one of the larger funds sort of turned the tables on IP and said to the quant PMs, "It's your IP. You can come with it. You can go with it. You don't leave it here." And their idea was that things change so fast that the hedge fund that made that change figured it doesn't matter because we're not losing anything because alphas get chewed up every weeks to months. So we can give it to them and we're not giving them anything. But the corollary to that, and what I'm hearing from you, is when you bring in your own data, you have more control over it, over not just the ETL, but the types of data that come in, as opposed to working with, a closed, like a box that we all grew up with, those two terminals that we know and love and paid a lot of money for.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the idea. And you mentioned crypto. So there is no established vendor in the world of crypto, and hence the sort of like the appeal of things like OpenBB. So someone, for instance, I guess your guy's shoes. So you're dealing with macro indicators, you're dealing with equity data, and you want to throw in crypto data on top of it. Like it's uniquely you. So you basically need something that would allow you to handle all this variety of data that makes sense to you and for your business needs, but it doesn't need to make sense to anybody else. But the established business model can't handle that. So it's basically, there's a vendor for this particular piece, there's another vendor for another piece, and everyone charges you a lot of money. And it's a compliance hell to upload your own data into it. Right. So imagine you're a wealth manager, risk manager, and anyone who's essentially dealing with a sensitive client's data. It's a very common use case. So for all of those things, everyone builds their own internal system. So the reason why you go to these hedge fund offices and people have 10 screens in front of them, it's kind of crazy, is because you actually have 10 applications to look at sometimes. And that's one of the areas where we're trying to help people that, let's just consolidate all of this into, you just need a data license. You don't need 10 screens to look at. I mean, if you want a big screen, by all means, knock yourself out. But, you don't need one screen per application.
No, and it's just a part with digital assets in particular. We were talking to Doug Shank at Digital Asset Research, and I've known him for a number of years. He's been in this space a long time. He has excellent market structure data. I probably mention that every third podcast because I'm just really excited about taking his data and pushing it, into our pipes and comparing it to ETF data and to other data and harmonizing it. And that's basically what a data scientist or anyone in research has to do. I know Bill, probably has a lot more experience in working with the data to drive a research product. But Bill, what do you think the barrier would be for TradFi to adopt an OpenBB versus, the traditional orange screens that they use?
Well, the easy answer is OpenBB probably won't solve the instant messenger Bloomberg problem where, it's basically a trade record anytime soon. And anyone that's been around for a long time is just so used to Bloomberg that, but we're aging out a little bit. And I think over time, people will just be less reliant on Bloomberg for all of their market data. I think that, in the OTC space, there probably will still be a need for Bloomberg IB, just to execute trades and things like that. But that's the obvious answer. If you need Bloomberg to do your job, you're going to keep Bloomberg. And then secondly, I think as the legacy systems do mature and ultimately become tech debt, the large quant funds I've worked for have built, pretty much all of this functionality in-house. That's performance attribution, risk attribution, intraday P&L, historical P&L, all these things. Never had a third party provider who could give you what a quant needed, which 10, 15 years ago was just a much different analytic than the rest of the hedge fund space. So most of the hedge fund space is used to looking at a handful of positions or maybe like 100, but not 4,000 or 10,000. So
Yeah.
now that those legacy systems are going to come offline, I think things like OpenBB will be the obvious choice. And with emerging managers that are setting things up, I always, advise seriously consider buying rather than building almost any tech. And after you have your data pipelines figured out, analytics and visualizations and things like that should be pretty straightforward. But you don't want to maintain that. You don't want to support that. And so, I think the second long-winded answer is really just newer entrants will embrace things like OpenBB and have a competitive advantage against, the legacy companies that have all of these old systems that they're going to continue to rely on just because it's so expensive to extricate yourself from all that tech debt.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say like, carry on, Mark. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you.
I was thinking anything with the QSIP may be harder to extract, or especially in the bond language because of that extra information. But those millions of people who are on TradingView on the digital asset side, they are unnatural to come in because you need to, in digital assets, Ihsan, you have to port in data from the foundation, the unlocks on the coins. You have to look at the venture capital fundings. So you bring in all this external data. A lot of it's available, and other folks. No one has an edge on that data. No one has like you said. No one has set up as to be that animal. I mean, there are folks who have plenty of data, but no one has everything. So you're going to have to hunt and peck and pull it into a system like Bill said, and you guys are the other front end. I mean, I don't know if you got the email, Bill, but Bill's going to show some slides on our markets that we look at, and I'm doing old time. I mean, I feel like Fred Flintstone. I'm going into CoiFin. I'm downloading a template, putting it into Excel, into my own touch and feel, snapping a picture, putting it in a PowerPoint, and then email it to Bill. I mean, literally, I feel like I'm going to the Water Buffalo Club tonight because it is absolutely old school. But when Bill pulls those up, and Bill, thanks for doing that. You said, Ihsan, you'd be able to talk about how maybe you look at data through OpenBB. If someone's going to try to look at rates or anything, we can talk about how folks that you've seen watch markets. Is that a good sort of next leg after we look at some of the market data?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. So, I mean, what I had in mind just to like showcase the kind of things that you can do here is we can look into FOMC, which is starting today. I believe the announcement, last I checked the calendar, I think the press release is supposed to come tomorrow, I believe. I think it's starting today. So what I prepared, for example, we just had actually a webinar on the subject earlier in the day. So what I prepared, for instance, let's just maybe use that as the background. So let's say you're interested in the FOMC, what's going to come out of the FOMC meeting. So they put a lot of communication out. Most of it is in the form of PDFs and things of that nature. So I prepared a few things around like those projections. I think that one of the key things they're looking for tomorrow is going to be the release of economic projections. Like that's where the plot is coming from. Like the median expectation about the rate changes for the end of the year. So it seems like the expectation for tomorrow is not very high in terms of rate cuts, but like what do we expect the rate to be by the end of the year is something that's been closely watched for. So what people look at these type of documents like and where AI could significantly help. And that's one of the, I think is one of the key issues with the use of OpenBB in this investor space. We were talking about data, but I think we've been talking about it more like structured market data type of stuff. But there's also this other element of this documents and all these unstructured things that are going on, things like news, things like these PDFs. So it's a bit all over the place. And some of these are areas also AI extra shines, right? Because it's actually pretty good at just doing an OCR and going to the document and just very quickly tell you what you're looking for. Like I can scrape an entire table very quickly without, manual actually reading any of these things and things of that nature. So I'll show some examples of that after the update that you guys give on the markets. That could be a good segue.
I think we may as well segue there now. This is a good demonstration of old technology failing us. I'm waiting for some code to get emailed to me from Microsoft because Mark shared a PowerPoint presentation that's like a link, and basically this is a very good illustration of why we would want a live dashboard, and so please take us away, Ihsan.
Definitely. We also have live sharing.
That's how Bill and I. Yeah, that's why Bill and I in our business we're going to be doing permissioning through your platform. Once we get our back end set up, the client engagement. I had a meeting the other day, and we're looking for HDMI cords. I mean, it's embarrassing.
Yeah. So this is how sharing works at OpenBB. If I don't have anyone here that's going to be able to do this, but everything that we do here, this applications and widgets and all that good stuff, you can instantly share it with people in your account. So they will just basically show up here. I think I removed it at some point for the purposes of the sharing my screen and not showing stuff that people shared with me, but you just basically instantly see all of these things. And the nice thing is that, look, like I have a dashboard here, I have an application, I can just show you this piece. So when you land on OpenBB, think of it this way, like OpenBB is like an empty canvas when you land. Let's just hide that. So what you're going to do is that you're going to essentially either from your colleagues, from the open source community, from the vendors that you work with, and your internal developers, who they might be, you're essentially going to basically connect these applications. The application could be about anything. So I have an application that looks at the text, the full text of the bills that comes from Congress. I have stuff about Fred. I have things around one of the things that I'm going to show that does some portfolio analysis, regressing portfolio returns to former French factors and things of that nature. It could be about anything. It's whatever you want it to be, essentially. So I have this one application here for the purposes of demo. This is specifically looking at FOMC docs. And then when you're collaboratively working with somebody, you just basically share, and then they got a copy of these things which they can fork and build on top of. Or you can just basically wait for their colleague to keep syncing. So when they make changes, you basically see the interactive version, like whatever changes that they make, you can see it. So just, I guess, go through a couple of examples here, like what we can do here. So I'll try to mimic, the things that I would expect someone who's on the treasury side of things or might be, looking at the data tomorrow. So in this, like this is all custom. So what we have done here in this case is that we have, like, the data is public. The data is actually coming from these website, like FOMC, sorry, the Fred Zone website. They have all the meeting notes. The data is public. So this application under the hood essentially just gets all the documents. We built an application that basically just gets all these documents from that public source and created this user interface. this is complete our design. So if you want to order data in some other way, go ahead and order in that way. So let's just go through one example. So this is the latest press release that we have. So a new one is going to come tomorrow. And here's the interesting piece, like similar to dealing with any kind of data that you can connect here that's relevant for you. We believe that in the future, there's also going to be the similar kind of competition going on the AI side. I mean, there's already a lot of models out there. There's open source commercial ones, and these vendors give API access, and you can use that API to build your own agent on top of a foundational model. So what I'm going to demonstrate here is that just for purposes of like showing these things to you guys, we actually put together an agent that is called here is that the FOMC agent, which uses Gemini under the hood. And what is cool about this agent is that I was working with our chief AI engineer, and I pointed him to this research that came from Fed's own published research notes about how to use generative AI models to understand FOMC stuff. This is own published research. They basically give that, look, when you're looking at FOMC statements, they did this analysis where they manually labeled a lot of FOMC text, and they said that, look, these are the 7 topics that I expect to see in an FOMC document. Here are some examples. And what I've done is I took this, I worked with our engineer colleague to essentially, quote unquote, train this agent to read the FOMC document in a way that Fed's own research point us with the examples that they provided, right? So let's see it in action, right? So I have the last press release. The way that it works is that any piece of data, so this is a widget, right? So I have other widgets here. So each one of these things is a widget. You can move it around. This is actually TradingView. You talked about TradingView before.
For the uninitiated, Ihsan, can you explain a widget versus another interface?
So widget is this little box that you're seeing on the screen. So every piece of data, we call these things a widget. So the widget is like a tile in your dashboard. So it's a almost like a plain, like it's not a very technical term. It's actually plain English. So you can think of it as like everything that you see on the screen that I can move around is a widget. But what is this widget? Well, this widget, this one on the screen right now, is making a call to Fred API to fetch some data. So think of it this way. I created a little box around this data, and I'm calling it a widget. And now I can have as many widgets as I like in my libraries. I can build a library of widgets. Currently, I have 846 such widgets from all sorts of different data sources. I have crypto data coming from, I have commodity data coming from EIA. I have some data coming from an individual vendor and things of that nature. So basically, you can build an entire widget library of little containers of data that are unique to you. It could come from any source that you would like. And then you essentially build this application by putting these widgets together into a little dashboard tab kind of form. Like this is custom. So I basically organize this as that, first part of my workflow, I'm going to look at the documents. So this is my FOMC documents widget. And then I have some indicators widget. And I created a tab where I want to look at some market data on treasury yields. Yep. So this design is me. It's just basically I sit down and created this thing because it makes sense to me. So what you can do is you can actually download the code behind this layout, and I can make it part of my code, and I can upload it to cloud and give credentials to you and look at the application that I developed for you. So that's another way of essentially sharing things with people. Like I can just share it directly here with you, or I can just basically package this collection of widgets, call it, here's my OpenBB application, and give access to that. So that's how it looks like if you follow that route.
And for communicating, doing a journal or a weekly newsletter, or Bill and I have Substacks, to be able to just sort through by category, et cetera, and then go to a widget, change the date, take a snapshot, just put it right in the newsletter. I mean, it just sounds, that's one use I think would be tremendously helpful for the gig editorialist out there.
Yeah, because AI is a very good writer. right? So you can imagine, for instance, like we have experimented with it in the past. I don't have an example here, but for example, the reasoning models like DeepSeek and whatnot, when I worked with this when it first came out and it was a big, big buzz, it's actually a very good writer. So if you give it a good system prompt and sort of train him, tweak him in the style that you would like to write, and then basically what you need is that, let's say you want to create a memo and you want to use some data as input, and you want that writing agent to generate a brief write-up citing the data that you point to, right? So that's a fairly common use case actually that we see, right? Like, because the investors are writing a lot, like not just, people that you guys, a little bit more specialized maybe towards because you have your Substack, your newsletter, but even people who don't commercially publish these things, right? They investors write a lot. You send notes to people all the time, like sell side. I used to have a chief data science position in a fintech firm who was doing a lot of business with the sell side. And I remember something like the number of opinions or commentary published by a single bank is in the order of hundreds a day. And this is the client facing stuff, right? So a lot of this writing partly could be automated. You just basically need to give the idea, point to the right data source, but the style, the styling and things of that nature, AI can actually handle a lot of these things and then give you a pretty decent draft that you just need to edit a little bit and then instant share. So that could be the feature that we're moving towards potentially. So let's just continue with this exercise, by the way. So here I have the press release. It's like, this is a custom agent. So I'll just show you what it does the custom way. So, if you just drop this document to ChatGPT and ask, just summarize this thing for me, it may or may not know how to think about the specific FOMC terms and the language that is used here, what is a proper topic and things of that nature. And more importantly, like, I moved from one document to another, it may not be consistent. So for a researcher, it's quite important that whatever document that I throw here, I get a response that is consistently labeled and it uses the same language when it's classifying the text and things of that nature. So that's what we were aiming for here. So what I've done in this case is that, okay, so take this document. I'm not going to give it like a super detailed prompt. And I said, look, just summarize this press release for every key topic that it contains. All right, so let's just wait for it to render. These documents are a little bit lengthy. So here's what it does. So it actually goes through this PDF sentence by sentence, and then it's going to assign every sentence to a category that Fed's own research categorizes, right? So the economic activity has continued at a solid pace. This is in the topic of real activity.
So you trained it on the Fed data to do exactly that. You mentioned it earlier, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I said that, look, here are some examples. This is how Fed's own research says you should read an FOMC statement. I want my summary and categorization to reflect that. In addition to that, I want you to think about, like, give me a sense of what is the sentiment in this. Like, I'm not trying to score it. I just want to say, is this a positive? Is this a neutral statement? Is it like a negative sentiment? Like, what is it, right? So what is the sentiment around this thing? And then why did you reason to assign that sentiment? So it doesn't feel like a black box, right? So the unemployment rate has been stabilized. So now this is about labor markets, and it's a positive sentiment because unemployment, they're communicating that the unemployment going in the low level is a good thing. So why am I doing this, right? So here is another piece of the magic. So everything that you generate on this chat side, you can add it to your dashboard or application as a widget. If this works, hold on one second. So you're not stuck in this environment where it's like purely chat, right? So this is one of the things that people like on the investor space. People struggle with applications like ChatGPT because it's yet another application that you have to work with, right? So now I have this output, but I don't need to read it from here. I just basically add this output and make it another widget. And now from this widget, I can do something else. For example, I switch to OpenBB Copilot. So now that I have parsed the statement sentence by sentence, I'm done with the original PDF. I don't need to deal with that anymore. I'm just going to add this to context. Let's just create a new chat thread. Say that, look, let's summarize all statements specific to inflation and point to the sentences about tariffs impact on inflation. So now I created my own label data using this custom agent. So now I'm just going to work with that output for the next step to say that, look, I want an inflation specific summary. Forget the original statement, so the PDF, just basically work with this. All right, so is there a specific mention of tariffs in this case? Like, you can basically just look for it here. So, and all of these things, like, look, this is markdown text. So you can actually just use this editor to create something here. And if you want to share it with other people, you can share it directly from here.
This is very cool. First of all, I actually didn't appreciate that OpenBB had this agentic LLM, interface where you're going back and forth, which is really cool. But some of what we're doing here, I think, is getting, deep dive on this document. Is there also a way to just extract the sentiment in particular from this? And, to cut to the chase, like, I just want to know if this is good for the S&P 500 or, different indexes worldwide. And, if I'm a futures trader, maybe I just want to react to this thing as soon as possible. Is there a way to sort of parse out the scoring of the sentiment?
Yeah, so you can introduce scoring here, definitely, right? So, I mean, you're basically in charge of these agents. So there are scoring models who are actually pretty good at, coming up with a numerical number for a lot of these things. So what you can potentially do here is that I was looking at the latest minutes and whatnot. So maybe you can have like a 2-layered approach. You do something like, okay, let's use some agent like this to first identify all the key topics that I think that I have some theory. And if you don't have a theory, you can ask DeepSeek. These reasoning agents are actually very good at coming up brainstorming ideas, deep research and things of that nature. Like, we use it all the time to come up with ideas. Like, if I don't know what should I expect and should be the correlation between these documents and the change in the language and S&P 500 features and things of that nature, those would be pretty good tools. And you actually hit the nail on the head. Like, that's really the reason why we support this multiple agent thing, because one agent is not good at everything. So I might have a brainstorming agent to come up with these type of ideas. And then I have another agent which takes this document and then maybe tweezes out those particular statements that I think is going to matter. And then I can have another agent which is actually good at scoring. I just basically say that, look, take these statements that I just parsed this FOMC minutes, a pretty long, 19-page document. I just parsed it into specific topics. So start here, take the sentences that are related to inflation, and now I want you to come up with a score relative to how you scored it in the previous FOMC meeting, and then take a decision based on that. And if you don't know how to interpret it, ask DeepSeek to interpret it for you, right? So that's really the inspiration behind this sort of interaction, as opposed to, we were talking about disruption and established models and everything. So what most established vendors are doing today is that, I have the data here, slap an AI agent on top of it, and that's it. But it's the same problem. Like, how do you expect that single agent to be good at every piece of your workflow? So more likely than not, and this is what we're seeing at the practice with, all the buy side, sell side conversations that we're having, you're much more likely to have specialized agents doing specific things to help you. So you actually need an interface like this where you can interact with multiple of them, each designed to do its own thing. Like, in the span of conversation that we've been having, we have actually seen OpenBB Copilot, which uses OpenAI. DeepSeek is here. FOMC agent is using Gemini. Later, maybe in the conversation, I'll give you an example of this thing for portfolio commentary, which is using Perplexity to search the web and look for ETF prospectuses and things of that nature. So even in this conversation, right, you're actually dealing with 5 different models. And we
Right.
feel like that's more like how the future is going to be like.
And if I'm using this exactly as you are, do I need to have API access to all of those different LLM models, or is that
Yeah,
enabled?
so
Yeah.
yeah, so we don't develop the agent at the end of the day. So we will help you manage the keys and all of that credential stuff. Like that's infrastructure that we can provide. But how you develop the agent is right now it's the developer territory. So if you want to do business with Gemini, do business with Gemini essentially. So open source is a very strong alternative. Like we in my personal experience, I got a lot of mileage from models like DeepSeek and Quen.
Right.
Um, so that's like Hugging Face is a place where you might get access to a lot of open source stuff, which won't cost you nearly as much.
Right.
I'm not an engineer, not an expert in some of these fields, but for what I follow the industry, I mean, open source is really catching up to some of these commercial vendors. And if the use cases that we show here, you want agents who are designed to do very specific narrow tasks, then the difference between sometimes the difference between a commercial, massive model versus and a smaller open source model may not be that different, right? Like
Right.
one of the biggest advantages of those massive commercial models is that they can handle a huge variety of tasks. So if that's what you're looking for, then it's hard to replicate that kind of experience with a small open source model. Um, but if the world is more like, yeah, I just need something that I'm going to do a lot of hand holding, and I just wanted to be able to do this particular, write me a commentary about FOMC statement. Maybe for that, you can get away with it, a good open source model, and it actually won't cost you nearly as much. And then you would run it on-prem, and you own the AI, you own the software. No one is snooping anything you're doing.
Cool.
Yeah, this does what when Bill and I are talking, or when I first got introduced to the work Bill was doing in AI, I'm like it just accelerates the process of understanding dramatically. The reach it has to grab data, the ability to turn it over and see it in different dimensions is is priceless. It's going to be driving, and it has, and compressing the analyst layer, I think, and forcing people to go up the margin curve. And part of it is understanding how to use it, because it's what you just did there. My mind went to 2 other uses about going through those same minutes and seeing how much, like giving a prompt saying, if you started out in the year 2010 and read Fed minutes for the prior 20 years, what would you expect the policy to be in the next 10 years? So, just that look back. And then show me what they actually did, because they've changed so often. And by using this tool, you could really engage it and show how much monetary policy has been reactive and variable. They talk about long and variable lags. I mean, their policy is a long and variable lag,
Mm-hmm.
because of the problems that they have. So thanks for that. I'm gonna hit you up after this.
So
Ihsan.
I did something entertaining while you were talking about this, right? So I took the latest projections. The tomorrow there's going to be new projections, and this is one of the things that a lot of people will be looking for. Like it's like one line in a table buried in this document, where there's a lot of trading activity going on today, right? So essentially this what people call as the dot plot. So I actually pulled the data from Fred. This is what the dot plot is when people talk about it. So this is the
Yep.
median estimate for the year end. So you can actually pull the data directly from Fed if you know the ID. And let's just turn it into chart form. Like this is generating a lot of activity and speculation for tomorrow. Like currently, the year end the rate expectations are at 3.9%. Where we are today is, let me see, I think we are around like 4. So we're in this like 4.33. I think it's just Fed is pointing to 4.25, the midpoint of 4.25 and 4.5 in the data. And what I did while you were talking this is that I went to the previous projection and I just asked for, okay, just go find this number. I don't know where it is. Just go figure it out, right? It turns out like it actually pointed to the table. It extracted this particular row that I'm looking for. I don't like the way that it's cited. I just said, okay, just make it into a table. And there you go. I got my table. Something is buggy here, so I'm going to do this way. So now this table is available as a widget.
Wow.
And when you say it's available as a widget, does that mean, next time the Fed, well, I guess tomorrow it will update, and then next time this is just available and it will start building the...
Yeah, unfortunately, no. That's one of the things that people start asking as the adoption is like we're more people.
So
is not going to.
I don't know if
really
that
work
sounds
towards
okay to you,
is-
Mark, but did Ihsan just break up for you?
I'm I think I've broken. You guys see me?
Yeah.
Am I back? I can hear you, and Mark is frozen for me.
Well, I guess that these are the growing pains of having a live podcast. I think
Mark dropped out.
Oh,
Can you guys
now
hear
you're
me?
back. I would say for the last 2 minutes, all I heard was broken up. I'm
Oh
not
yeah,
sure what's going on.
Let me just you also lost Mark, so it might be you actually, but I'm not so sure. But in any case, what I was trying to say to your question, let me know if I break up again.
Okay.
That this is static. This is not going to renew or update, and part of the reason for that is the whole concept is the way that you're interacting with the AI is human in the loop, right? Like the whole application runs through your browser. So it assumes that you're an analyst sitting in front of it and you're interacting with it. So people have been asking for these things, and this is actually the direction that we might go. We can do scheduled refreshes and things of that nature. But I guess that philosophical issue still remains. Say that, look, I say, run this prompt and update this table tomorrow at 3 p.m. when FOMC press release is expected to come, and continue checking this for 5 minutes. So something like that could be built. I don't think it's that difficult. But the issue is that suppose you're not in front of your browser, you just turned off your laptop and left for coffee. Is it supposed to work, right? In our current philosophy, it probably shouldn't, right? Like, I assume that you're there and you're looking at this, you're interacting with it. So it is something that we keep hearing a lot more, having AI do things on a schedule. And we actually have ways of doing this, if not this, but maybe something a bit more like what I'm going to show if you have time on the Snowflake side of those things. Like, you can also have a different kind of interaction with AI in which you're not manually adding data as context every time. You can basically have an agent that knows and already has access to the AI, to the data set. I don't need to manually add it. I just need to ask a question. It knows that it needs to go to this data set and then look for the answer and return the response to me. So I can show an example of that. And that way might actually be the right way to set it. Look, irrespective of I'm in the loop, I'm in front of my browser or not, next time I come back in and I ask the AI, it will know the answer because it's going to have access to a document that that now it had access, it previously didn't, and I don't need to manually add it. I can show that example, how that works.
I think I'd like to see that. I don't know, Bill, if you have a very
Yeah. I think
it's
that's
actually,
more or
no,
less the use case that I see here is you find something cool looking at the last one and you're like, okay, this seems like a good analytic. I might want to figure out how to make a decision based on the answer. Let's deploy it. And whether or not you're staring at it tomorrow, or you can somehow ingest it into a system and have alerts or whatever. But yeah, that would be cool.
Yeah. So I have an example for that. It's not nearly as sophisticated that the FOMC stuff that we talked through, but it will illustrate the idea. So I just basically prepared it with Snowflake in mind. So maybe this is also a good segue. So this is like we were just fiddling with here in the macroeconomic indicators. I've been pulling them from Fred directly. So Snowflake is a marketplace. So you can kind of see it here. Like they have this financial economic essentials. This is free and publicly available data set. So they have most of the key economic indicators. They make it available. If you have a Snowflake account, you can get access to this data set for free. They don't charge you for it. And what we have done is there's a lot of Bureau of Labor Statistics data here. So one of these things is related to inflation, the example that I'm going to show. So what we have done here is that try to operationalize this. So suppose that, again, I'm in this workspace. I don't want to go to Snowflake's own UI. I just want to be able to access that data through AI and just through my workspace. So the example that I had here was, suppose that I put a widget here, which basically has the description of all the data sets. And there's a lot going on here. I don't know where's the CPI data, right? So let's say that I'm interested in where to find the CPI data. I can ask this to my Copilot to say where it is most likely that I find CPI data or PCE data, and then just basically AI go through the descriptions of these data sets and tell me where I should be looking at because it's a database that I've never seen before. So that's one option. The other option is more like what we were discussing earlier. So they have, and other vendors have similar kind of products nowadays. But look, it said that, look, you're most likely to go to Bureau of Labor Statistics, and there's actually a table called BLS Price Index Time Series. That's where you should expect to find it. Just go look at there. So I can essentially go, I made a table, I can browse. So these are all widgets that I made to navigate that Snowflake without ever going into Snowflake. Right, so I can just basically put my query here. I can navigate these tables and look for that data manually if I'm looking for it, right? But the other way to do it is they have this thing called Cortex Analyst. So Cortex, you can ask a question in plain English. It will figure out where the data might live, and then use the latest version of the table and then respond to you with a query. It will write the SQL query. You don't need to know how to write it. So for instance, here in this case, let's just say run, I'm not looking for the table. I'm literally asking the question. So I need to know what CPI metrics are available in this data about food and energy, right? So here are all the options that are available. And if you're familiar with it, the one that FOMC typically cites is CPI, all items, less food and energy, annual, seasonally adjusted, or the monthly frequency. So all the options are essentially here. So this is like a data catalog searcher. So I just asked the question in English, it wrote a query, find the right place, and then return me the data. I can add this as a widget, and then just basically work with this output to do something like, okay, so maybe go pull this data, go pull that other data. But the point of this interaction is this. This agent, it has access to the latest version of the data. So if you can, in principle, I don't have that example here, design an agent which has all of these FOMC documents that we just talked through sitting in a database. It has access to it. I don't need to manually point out to say, oh, go add this document to the context tomorrow at 3 p.m. And then here's the question, go figure it out. In this experience, look, I haven't added any table, anything to the context because the context is actually hidden behind this widget. So it already has the tables that it knows how to work with them. So this is more like that kind of workflow that I just basically asked the question. It has access to the most up-to-date data. All that we need to introduce here potentially right now, you can just run it. So it again, the philosophy is that you're there, you're looking at this, you're the human in the loop, and you're asking this question to the AI. But
so bring this back to OpenBB, Ihsan.
Mm-hmm.
As far as your value prop, because you're in Snowflake right now, right? Which is a third-party service.
This is OpenBB. I just changed the colors from dark to white.
Got it.
That's it. This is OpenBB. I'm actually interacting with Snowflake data without going to Snowflake.
Got it. That's
So
how
look,
seamless it was, Ihsan. That's how seamless it was.
yeah, the proof is right there. You thought I'm on Snowflake. I'm
That
actually
wasn't
not
a
on
plan.
Snowflake.
That was a real question.
Look, this is pro.openbb. Just a slightly different version of it because this is still testing. But look, I copy pasted some query to get the CPI data that I was looking for, and I wrote a query that would compute the year-over-year change. Run. So I'm not on Snowflake. I'm just basically using Snowflake's connector to fetch the data from Snowflake. I got the response. Make a widget out of this. There you go. Here's my CPI. I computed the year-over-year change. Now do select all, turn to chart, make a line chart, go to settings, get rid of the current value. Here is your CPI data pulled from Snowflake without ever touching Snowflake.
Yeah, wow.
So hopefully soon,
So
you're going to be able to do this
I'm
like
going to give
less
my
clicks.
market commentary here, just as you have this up. The big point I think for everybody is look at this. What Ihsan just pulled up from Snowflake in your OpenBB widget now, and we peaked in the Liz Truss moment, or in August 22 approximately, and we've gone down since. But one country that hasn't is Japan. Japan is revisiting the highs of 22 in inflation. And I think it's a 3.6 estimate. I think it went as high as 4, in the backlash of 22. And remember what they had last year with the failure in the Nikkei dropped, 9.7% in one day last July, I think, or August of 23. And they're having problems again. So I think, and the reason I'm going to follow up on this with you later is because the Fed is in a pickle, even within their own country, of saying, growth looks like it's, pretty good. Like you got a 4% estimate by some people 1.5. They're all over the place. They don't know where growth is, but it's somewhere between 1.5 and 4, which tells you something about certainty. And then you have CPI that's trending lower, but you have a persistence of price gains that we'll talk about later. These numbers that are hidden in not including CPI and how CPI is included. But the Fed is trying to lower rates. They have a good growth. They can't. That's what we're going to see tomorrow in the presser. I agree with you. But when we look at other countries, Japan, with their price increases, they're letting kind of rates go higher. They're letting it run a little hot because they have so much inflation. But if we leave our rates high and Japan stays low, the whole dynamic across countries hasn't even kicked in yet, where everyone's going to try to be addressing their own problems, but we're one water table. So capital is going to be flowing into us out of Japan if we keep our rates high. and they still have, run a negative real rate of 300 basis points, 400 basis points, 350. It's absolutely destabilizing, to say the least. But from a visual standpoint, that was a lot of gobbledygook. If you look at what you showed, and if you looked at Japan's rates, which is why I love visualizing data, Ihsan, because it cuts to the core. The picture 1,000 words is just times 10 when you talk about finance to try to get an abstract concept. Japan's inflation is rising. That's a problem for their currency. And the Fed, I think, is pickled because they not only deal with internal issues, but they have to deal with a stable global market, which they're effectively the custodian of, being the reserve currency.
We
So
should
we got a lot
expect this.
going on. That's a long way of saying Thursday's CPI print, folks, Japan, that's the one to look at.
I guess based on your argument, we should expect to see more U.S. Steel Nippon type of deals with the
More what type?
So you mentioned that, with this scenario, there's going to be capital inflow from Japan to United States. And I'm saying that probably translates to we expect to see more deals like U.S. Steel Nippon type of, with the administration drawn into these extended M&A battles and things of that nature.
Yeah, and we have a president who loves deals. So, I don't think Scott Bessent has given him bad information about what's going on. Bessent knows he can't beat the deficit. He said almost said as much about a month ago. So now it's grow, baby, grow. It's let's go. We're hot. Let's make deals. Let's expand to try to outpace the debt.
Mm-hmm. So while you were talking about this, I asked Cortex if you have data on Japan, and it said no. So I was trying to show it while you speak, but according to Cortex, they don't have the Japan data here.
Yeah, I think that they have a free version. Maybe it's just US or something. Well, this has been a very cool demo of, again, what I'll consider very sophisticated analytical tools around FOMC. I do have a selfish request. Would you be able to show us that FOMC French dashboard? I was just curious. Oh, yeah. So as a way to do portfolio analytics and attribution around quant factors, I just wanted to.
Absolutely. So let's just open this into a new chat. Let's move this to the side. Yeah, so basically what we put together here is that this is all coming from like FOMC French data library that they make available for free. So we make this open source available for everybody. You can just download the OpenBB installer and get access to this app. The data is publicly available. That doesn't even check credentials. So basically this looks at the academic version of the data. You can look at factor returns, in themselves, like, let's just take a look at, so this is the typical FOMC factor, 5-factor model. They make it available for like different regions for their compute. I think they have like several different versions of these things. So we just make that data available coming from that public website. You can turn it to chart. You can ask AI some questions, get it compute something if you would like. But the use case here was essentially the following. So I put some mock client data here, right? Because we're deployed on-prem, so you can work with any kind of sensitive data. So this mock client data is, let's say that you have one client and whose top holdings is this, right? So we also have this like grouping mechanism, so I can update my dashboard. Let's say that I'm looking at client 2. It's like everything, the entire dashboard is going to update to show me the second client's data. So this is some mock client, let's say, that I'm looking at their exposures by country, exposure by sector and industry, and I know what their top holdings are. You can do things like, we computed the correlation matrix and shove it here. The whole point of this is that you're actually not limited to the visualization tools that we make available. Like you can do super custom things like this one, and then just show it to people.
And are these like Matplotlib or
Yeah,
Python?
this is Plotly. Yeah, this is all
Plotly.
open source Plotly. We support a few. Plotly is the most popular one. So you can do very custom things. You can insert your own logos and things of that nature. Like this is generally the best for, like this is my visual standard and I'm going to do something crazy custom type of solution.
Yeah.
You can also even do these type of things, right? So what I'm doing in this case is, I'm not asking the AI to run some regressions on the UI. What this is doing is that, look, like I'm choosing the client under the hood. It's computing the portfolio returns for that client, running a regression at different horizons against the choice of factors that I make here. And then it's just basically shows me the estimated coefficients color coded, right? So I'm looking for the constant. So it's basically saying that like it's color coded according to p-value, that like this portfolio doesn't have like alpha component, like it's very high beta and things of that nature. So it's like super custom. And then I can use these things, like to show like one super basic example. I'm gonna add this client's industry exposure and their holdings, and then I'm gonna say something like, make a recommendation for someone who has this portfolio. Right. So, but what I want to think about is that go try to diversify this client's portfolio. And the way that I want you to make recommendations is I want you to go look for Fidelity ETFs, mainly because all the prospectuses and expense ratios of Fidelity is ungated. So you can essentially look for some of these things. And by the way, I just realized that I'm using the wrong agent. Give me 1 second. We actually have a dedicated agent for this. Let me run the same thing here. Yeah, so this is actually using combination of DeepSeek and Perplexity. So it's going to do a web search and some reasoning to make some suggestions how this portfolio could be more diversified. So let's see what it comes up with. So yeah, I mean, this guy has significant exposure to drug manufacturers, like maybe like it's basically holding a single stock in that space. Like if you want to diversify to the entire industry, here's a good option with a low expense ratio. So why is it doing that? I'm not dealing with the basic DeepSeek in this case. Like again, I have a custom agent where I told that this is how I want you to think. I want you to go to these resources. Here's how I want you to do. And I get something like very custom that I can brainstorm ideas, like how let's just ask this question, like how would you assess the inflation risk of these holdings? Right, so I can do very custom things if I want to.
And which LLM is answering that question? If you don't,
this is DeepSeek.
Specify.
It's
DeepSeek.
DeepSeek, and it is using Perplexity when it needs to do a web search. Like that's the other thing. Your agent could be using 3 tools under the hood if they want to. So it's sky's the limit kind of world.
Yeah, and that's kind of configurable by the client. And again, like some of it's on-prem, and it would be based on their own design. So this is actually pretty cool, and I think it is what I was hoping to see. You could imagine a quant manager has, bar factors or some factor data set that's available in-house, and they can just display them and start slicing and dicing their portfolio with those and run correlations. And I could see why this could be very valuable to replace some of the analytics that are currently developed in-house at a quant fund. Another selfish request. Can you make it super easy for us to find this and like use it?
So I think the way to do this is we need to go to OpenBB platform. So let me just show you a few things. So you can go to our GitHub repository. So this is a pretty good source. So you can find lots of examples for different types of backends, like how to connect this type of data set, that type of data set. There's a ton of examples of how to build a particular type of widget. Like trading view is actually a good one. Mark, you mentioned it. So what we allow people, like there's some examples of this in these type of repositories. You can take trading view charts, strip the trading view data, and insert your own data feed into it. You will still see things the way that trading view does, because it's an amazing chart. There's no reason for us to go recreate it, but put your own stuff. Like we give examples of how to do those type of things. This is a good place. The other good place I'd recommend is the platform docs. So this platform, this is where you're going to see that open source applications that we make available. So you can go here, OpenBB platform docs installation, and it's going to basically give you a installer. So once you follow these examples of how to do the installation, you're going to get something that looks like this. Go to backend. So I'm running this platform installer locally on my laptop. Right, so all that I've done is just follow the instructions, download the installer, click run it, and come here, say connect the backend, put the address here, and now you have access to a whole bunch of open source apps that we have done, like FOMC, Fred, BLS, IMF. We've been working with Portwatch data to see the impact of like what is the activity, shipping activity in like choke points and things of that nature. All the data is public. So that public and open source examples, we basically make it available through this OpenBB installer. Credential data, those things, vendors do it. Like we're increasingly working with the vendors to develop these type of things. Like here's an example with someone with a newsletter. Basically, the way that they've been doing this is they can host it somewhere, and that all that you need to do is that the vendor basically just needs to give you some credentials. This is a newsletter like Fat Dispatch. So you just basically add that application here, and now I have access to their dashboard, their newsletter and things of that nature with the live data.
I'm in. That farmer French got Bill thinking. I can see the smoke.
Yeah, and the only thing that holds me back a little bit is just the installer, and like for our viewers and novices and graybeards like Mark and I, some of this stuff can be a little bit difficult, if not like intimidating, just to say, okay, am I running these in the command line, or are those executable in Jupyter notebooks? Like if I do want to do that, can you just talk us through like
yeah, but look, when you get the installer from here and there's a guide how to do it, you're gonna get an OpenBB environment that looks like this. It's a folder. So I'm on Mac. I just got a folder, and the folder has some clickable thing, OpenBB API. If you click on the link, it's gonna run it in your local machine. This is where it gets a little bit maybe, if you guys are not super familiar with this, the first time that I saw it, I was intimidated by it because I'm not an engineer. I'm an economist, data scientist, but like, I understand code. But when you click on this OpenBB API, it's just going to run it locally in your machine. And look, there's the address. That's it. You just need to copy paste this address and put it here. Apps, manage backend, OpenBB platform. Yeah, same address. That's it. It's running locally. I haven't deployed this to cloud. I'm not hosting it. Like it's literally running on my machine.
Okay, so I have to run the API, grab that URL, and then just put it into the
follow. There's even a video how to do it. Like there's the novice version, and there's a developer version who knows how to deal with Dockers and stuff like that. But just follow the installation. It's gonna just create an OpenBB folder on Mac. You click one thing, follow the guides, and you get access to all of these things for free.
Okay, cool.
Thanks for that, Ihsan.
Anytime.
And I know Bill's about to pull the curtain down. just throw out there's an Excel add-in too. Don't go into it, but yes, we can walk people in that way too. You can, right?
Yep. So we do have an Excel add-in. It's going to get a big facelift fairly soon. We're going to make it public, but I can tell you what it's going to do. So any numeric data that you see here, you're going to be able to just pull this. Actually, you can do it today. It's just that we haven't made very public announcement. So anything that's on your workspace, you're going to be able to just pull that data directly to Excel.
Yeah.
But just following something as simple as, like, you can kind of see the examples here. So I think it's, if you go to functions, so there you go. It's just basically telling you, put this to Excel cell, it will pull this widget to your Excel. It only works with numeric data though. Like, if you try to pull in, I don't know, PDFs and stuff like that, it's not going to work. But if it's numeric data that Excel can handle, it will pull it.
Perfect. All right. Well, I think that might be, it's a fully loaded show. I'll tell you that much, Ihsan. Thanks for going through.
Yeah, anytime. So I think next time, just try to speak more economics. We ended up talking a lot of technology this time.
All right.
I do actually have Mark's slides open, but yeah, we're an hour and 15. So I think we will call it a day. And yeah, this was very cool. Hopefully our audience can go back and watch the video and follow some of what you did and get ready for tomorrow.
Sounds good. Looking forward to tomorrow.
Yep. Cheers. Well, thanks, Ihsan.
Thanks all.
Take care, everybody.